So once we establish that there are really only two impacts of things, all these things we talked about over here, right, are internal links to those two impacts. Does that make sense?
Sure.
They're just ways of accessing those two impacts. So the debate is not about the myriad of things that the 2AC or the 2NC will spew down about whether or not. The debate ultimately is never going to come down to just whether or not like one single the spew of things the negative says why condo is good is going to win the debate. Because in a way, what we debate, as we said before, are just interpretations overall. The negative is trying to find an interpretation that solves all the aft reasons that it's bad, and the aft is trying to find an interpretation that allows the negative to do what they're doing, but solves the reasons that they say that it is good. The debate is always about interpretation. So instead of like this long laundry list of the greatest hits arguments like you were asking me about before, theory debates are won usually on one or two things that are a net benefit, just like with a counterclaim, that are a net benefit to a particular interpretation.
And I'll add something here is that the greatest hits laundry list theory debates where the aft gets up and reads their pre-written 2AC conditionality bad block, and the neg gets up and reads their 2NC block, and the 1AR gets up and reads the block that they have written for the 1AR, and you're just talking at each other. Those are the debates that get really messy that judges hate. The debates that Scott's talking about where people are good at theory debates and win theory debates more often is when you focus on one or two offensive arguments and how you access internal links to these two impacts. And do comparison, debate line by line. Don't just read a block straight at the judge.
The best position to be in is to have an interpretation that solves all or most of the other team's offense and has just a net beneficial reason why it's better. So let's say I'm aft against in a condo debate, right? And my interpretation is you get well, we'll just say you get two conditional counterclaims, two conditional advocacies, right? The negative, that puts the negative in a position where they have to win why 3 is better, or they have to have 3 to win the debate. And it puts the aft in a position where they can solve most of these arguments. So if they say critical thinking, you say, well, cool in the gang, man. You still access all your critical thinking arguments with 2 conditional counterclaims. How could that possibly not be enough? Yeah?
I'm just curious, like, what's the brink on that kind of argument? Like, what's the difference between 2 and 3?
That's exactly the argument we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I know, but like, so why would the app ever say that? Just say like 1. So.
Yeah, you could, yeah. You could just say you get 1 conditional counterclaim.
I don't think it makes sense for the app to give the negative any conditional counterclaims. Because most reasons why conditionality is bad are reasons why 1 conditional counterclaim is also bad.
So maybe a better example would have been to say dispo. But since I think dispo is silly too. But it makes sense as a counter interpretation. Or pre-round. Yeah. Like I say pre-round. Pre-round is probably the best one of these, right? Because pre-round might access the most internal links to these 2 arguments. So we say, look, you get all the benefits of this by the process through which you do research. Which means we solve your critical thinking, your best policy option. We solve all those arguments. And we put the negative in a position now where they just have to win why or it's justified for them to have more than 1 conditional advocacy in this. So that is where the debate comes down to. It's no longer whether a condo is good or bad, really. It's about the number of conditional counterclaims versus your interpretation. Yeah. Yeah, you're a pretty aggressive typer there, buddy. Are you actually taking notes, or are you just like pounding it because you're angry?
I'm taking notes.
Well, why are you?
Why is it just one finger?
Yes, Tyler, you never type like that before.
Stop being so weird.
I don't care how you type. If you gotta type in a way that allows other people to hear, that's fair. All right. See my counter interpretation? I think it's okay. The net benefit is people can hear the lecture. That's theory to me in a nutshell. Yeah. Congratulations, you proved my point. Yeah.
Could you impact turn the impacts, like fairness and education?
Yes.
Fairness bad.
How?
Fairness bad.
Well, there's lots of critiques of. Well, first of all, the question of education then becomes an epistemological debate about how we learn certain things and whether or not the forum that we're using is the best way to learn about them. And so the kind of education that's created through this offense-defense paradigm is bad.
We'll posit this too. The critical thinking argument may be an impact turn to fairness. Right? Yeah, it's kind of a little bit more unfair that the 2AC has to answer a bunch of stuff, but it gives you this education which is uniquely better than the loss of fairness, right? So, yeah, it might not be an impact turn as far as like, you can just say like fairness, sure, unfairness is good because it gives you education, and then weigh education versus fairness.
Debate's good because it's hard. The harder debate is, the more you think. Yeah.
Would saying that fairness isn't objective, that it's subjective, be a turn or
It's like a significant defensive argument. It's the beginning of a turn. Yeah.
So what you do is you say fairness bad. The way we think that fairness is wrong.
The way we conceptualize fairness is bad.
Yeah.
Your notion of fairness is a bad one. So not an argument I particularly agree with, but it's one that people make. Yeah.
Have either of you two participated or judged in a debate where like people actually like really talk about theory like this in depth?
I go for conditionality all the time.
Yeah.
And you like go like you expand on all the impacts and like.
Well, it won't be all the impacts because you'll have
Or not, I mean, like the
implications also
internally.
with other changes. Yeah. Huh? All right, we'll come back. Another question you have to answer in debating theory in general is a question of the paradigm for determining the outcome, determining the relevance of the impacts, right? There's two different paradigms we talked about. One is offense versus defense, and then one's a little bit more based on the idea of reasonability. This is very much like we talked about in topicality. The analog in T would be competing interpretations versus reasonability. Yeah.
Okay, I remember it.
Too late. Yeah, go ahead.
If they impact turn fairness, I can answer that.
Depends on what their impact terms of
If you say
fairness.
fairness, the way you think of fairness is bad, you should reject.
Yeah, you're gonna have to defend your notion of
Yeah.
fairness.
You gotta, when you say fairness is bad, you've already said fairness is good. You have to say fairness is good.
Like, just like, how do we just extend it, or like, okay, this is give reasons why fairness.
Well, they can say your notion of fairness is bad. You can say, even if that's true, our notion of fairness is one that's critical to people staying in debate, as having a fair chance of winning on both sides of it, of being able to restrict it to questions or resolutions, that we're all debating the same thing, we're joined or intersected, all this kind of stuff, or all those kind of things, right? So you probably already started that debate. You just have to defend your notion of fairness.
Yeah. And it's probably, if the debate's not fair, it probably doesn't access any of their education offense either, right?
All right. Anybody get what's the offense defense paradigm?
Offense is the best defense.
No. It's just comparing who's got. It's just who has the more offensive arguments, basically. It's sort of proliferation of who's got them versus reasonability, which is to say, think about this as competing interpretations. That's probably a better way to say it. And that's kind of what we're stressing here when we talk about having an interpret the comparison between the two things. Is you vote for the one that is the best, that you determine best accesses these two impacts. So if we decide that education is the biggest impact in the debate, then I'm voting for the interpretation of theory that is best for maximizing fairness or education in the debate, right? Now, reasonability is sort of a good is good enough kind of problem. Like, you're right, it could be a little better, but didn't we all learn something? That's probably cool in the gang.
We didn't make debate impossible.
Right.
So we should not, you should reject us.
This is really an argument the app is, the negative is going to make in theory debates. Or this is probably more the way the app wants to debate it, which is flipped than how it is in topicality, right? It's because the app is on the offensive and in the theory debate in particular, right? All right, we only have about 10 minutes until 9 o'clock. Are there anything on the list over here that we haven't kind of covered, or things you want to talk about, or have some questions? I don't want to like run to the last minute and not answer some of your questions. So, yes, sir.
I can remember.
Yes, sir.
Is it possible for you to have multiple counterplanes in the same world, like all my counterplanes are happening at the same time?
Yeah, for sure. And there's two ways to think about constructing that. Some people will say you might write one counterplan text with like a whole bunch of planks, what we jokingly refer to as the Whitman counterplan. Where it's like it does 10 things at once.
Yeah, they're all different. They're all different, like advantage counterplans to try and solve your app, but it does 10 things.
Or you could say, I'm going to read 10 different counterplans and do different things. And I might go for a few of them. Now, there's a debate about this, and I generally think, and I want to hear a couple things too. I generally think read them separately.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to, if you read them kind of all as one text, there's sort of an assumption, I think, in a lot of judges' minds that that's a singular counterclaim.
Yep.
And a permutation has to interact with all of the text, and a negative has to go for all of the text or not, right?
The argument that conditional planks are bad, that a counterplan that does 10 different things, each plank being conditional, is bad because they can pick and choose what to go for. The app will never be able to answer all 10 of those things, blah, blah, blah. Really, it's the same as reading 10 different counterplans, but a lot of judges are like, oh, but it was one text, and then you didn't go for all of it. What was that? What was that about? Brah.
Hey, bro, I'm jelly, bro. I'm kind of like, what's up?
So as the F, if you want reciprocity on condo, would you as a judge be okay with reading another plan text in the 2AC?
Maybe not in the plan text. Well, that's a great question. And one thing I want to definitely say about debating.
That's what we need to cover. Permutation.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Segue.
Yeah, perfect segue. Look, this is just me generally as a 2AC person and a coach. I kind of think that all these arguments, you clearly can win them individually, right? It's like either a reason to reject the team or a reason that the counterplan goes away. We didn't talk about ramp, but I kind of feel like what the app should be looking for in theory debates is less just the like, can I win the line by line of it, and more, if the negative is right and the things that they have done are justifiable, then what ground does that give the affirmative to do different things? And so, like if they win the conditionality is good, that might be a reason not why I get to replan in the 1AR, but it might be a reason, because I think that's kind of early to concede condo is good. Like out of the 2AC, screw it, new plan, you're right, condo good. I don't know about that. But you might say that it's the reason why I get to advocate the permutation, or the permutation becomes the plan. That's justifiable because that conditional net status, the counterplan, needs to be reciprocal to the app, and the way it can be reciprocal is for us to amend the plan in some way to become the permutation. So the permutation then is a different world of plan. You totally disagree with that? Really? Fair enough.
I think permutations are tests of competition.
They are until the counterplans. You hate condos, you can't like this. Yes?
But if they make CPs that solve for specific advantages, couldn't you make other plans that solve for their net benefits?
Yeah, it's called intrinsic.
Intrinsic. Yes, that's another thing people say conditionality justifies. Intrinsic.
Probably more reasonably justifies intrinsic than the example I gave about advocating firms. Yeah.
Aren't there some firms that if you win, they'll say you're cheating, like severance firms?
Sure.
Yeah.
Firms are kind of, this is what I think Colin was saying, firms are kind of always conditional. It's just a test. If you're just testing testing the competition counterplan, it's not a reason to vote against it.
Permutations have to include all of the plan and all or part of the counterplan or alternative. All right? A permutation that doesn't include all of the plan is severance because it severs out a part of the plan, which is bad for the negative because it allows the app to just be like, well, we're not going to defend this part of the plan anymore, so this that doesn't make, right? We don't intend your case arguments, we're not going for it. The other one is intrinsic, which is that if it includes all of the plan, all or part of the counterplan, and then something else that was not in the plan or the counterplan, it adds something else in, which is intrinsic. Also bad, the negative will say, because they have to just like add in anything to solve our links to disadds or solve the impacts.
Yeah, real quick, we got to talk about impacts again.
Okay, I got one question. Is it justified to revise the plan if the counterplan text is revised in the block?
Again, arguably. The question for me is, like I said, is for reciprocity. And if they do that, then you have to ask yourself, what's it justifiable for me to do in return? You know, exploit theory, you don't just...
I wouldn't say revise your plan, because that'll mess the whole debate up.
Yeah.
If they read a new counterplan or amend their counterplan in block, make like 18 different permutations that are all like intrinsic or something like that.
Yeah, that's probably a better way to describe what I was saying before about advocating permutations. It probably doesn't necessarily justify you advocating the permutation, like it becomes a plan, there's an amendment to the plan or whatever else, but it might justify you getting away with abusive permutations.
Yeah. Which, just as effective as advocating the permutation, gets you out of the block.
Really, what advocating the permutation means, I don't really know. if the permutation is justifiable and it solves the link to this ad, then you're probably in good shape.
Counterclaim goes away. I guess they have to be like, we can still go for the perm and solve your net benefit. But
Yeah.
So to continue on what Colin just said, so like if they don't give defense on the perm, then can you like stand and say like we solve for the counter plan or the net benefits, so we get the net benefits?
arguably, you can do that.
Okay.
If you win, that conditionality justifies advocating the perm. I think permutations are a no-link argument, like we talked before. It's a test of whether the counterplan competes with the app. But if you win that, it allows you to advocate them. And then in the 2AR, you wouldn't say we get the net benefit. Just say like our permutation, the permutation we are advocating it. It becomes an advocacy that the judge can vote for. And then you would say like one of the reasons that's good is because it doesn't link to the net benefit, which means that the neg has no offense.
I guess the way this plays out most commonly when this kind of thing kind of happens isn't that the permutation is advocated so much, but that they are going for a permutation that might be severance, for example. And because you amended your counter plan or did something like that, it's justifiable for the affirmative to sever part of the plan of the permutation. So it's not that we actually sever the plan or the perm becomes the plan. That's a distinction in a way without meaning. It's justifiable for us to advance a permutation that severs the plan because the counterplan was conditional, part of the app can therefore also be conditional. You have to decide whether or maybe it goes away. Now, most good negative teams are going to make that very difficult for you to do, but it's a world where it can. One other thing to talk about real quick is the distinction between how impacts happen and whether it's a voting issue or just a reason to reject the counterplan. And this is a debate that kind of, I think, in my mind, leans more towards the question of rejecting the argument, not the team. I have a very difficult time outside of the circumstances where something is just flatly conceded, understanding why you have to punish the team for a counterplan, or punish the team for a permutation, or anything else like that. Now, I have certainly voted as that stuff happens, usually because something was ill-explained or conceded, but still.
Yeah, if a counterplan is legitimate, it seems like the response should be that you do not get to read that counterplan instead of die.
Yeah, we kill you, and afterwards we eat the body. She's a witch. She's a witch, yeah.
So reject the argument not the team essentially is okay. Just disregard that and allow them to have VAs.
Well, it's just an answer to the voting issue. It's like, look, this doesn't right us. We didn't clip a card. We didn't punch their team in the face. We're not lying about anything. You didn't like the counterplan we read. You beat us on the counterplan. It goes away.
The perm was severance. You should not lose a debate. You should just not get that permutation.
All right, last question. This better be good.
What if the negative team comes up in the 1NC runs 10 off and like half of them are T? Or
Not good.
Like,
Our team?
Not a good question.
yeah, top of five. Like,
Probably
what?
need like half of those at least.
No, I know, but like,
9 of 10 T violations.
Go on. What's your question?
so I'm just giving an example, but like, wouldn't that be considered like abuse? Wouldn't that be a reason to reject the team?
No.
Because, okay.
That's the reason. That is the reason why conditionality is a reason to reject a team. Because it's the status of more than one argument which affects the entirety of the debate. Right? But it's not just like you read a counterplan that I thought was illegitimate.
It's just like saying, what if I read 10 out and they were bad disads? Is that a reason to reject the team? They made stupid arguments. It's a reason to vote for us because we're going to beat their dumb arguments. But it's not a reason to reject them. I see lots of people in debate that aren't making very smart decisions, but I would just vote against them. Actually, I do. That's